So if your boyfriend grew up in Korea and you grew up in a country very different from Korea, there might be some cultural differences.
My Korean husband.
Hey guys, I'm Nicola from the My Korean Husband blog, and usually I do videos with other people. I do them with my husband or maybe with Sophie, but today I'm just doing this one by myself. So back in Australia, Sophie and I made a video called How to Get a Korean Boyfriend, and this was really in response to a question we had seen a lot. So we wanted to sort of give a realistic answer. It wasn't really about how to get a Korean boyfriend. It was challenging people's ideas about Korean men and what they wanted and why they wanted it. And really just giving some advice on how to meet Korean people in your own country and learning the language and learning about the culture. So we had an overwhelmingly positive response to that video, so thank you guys so much. And unfortunately, some people seem to think that talking about cultural differences is somehow racist, or even mentioning that somebody is Korean is somehow racist, instead of understanding that actually we are celebrating cultural differences and we think cultural differences are really great. And in order to understand cultural differences and cultural differences that may be in your own relationship, you need to acknowledge them in the beginning. It's also really important to remember that sometimes online commenters may be the people who have grown up as a minority in the country, whereas our husbands grew up as part of the majority, so they were part of the majority in Korea. So that's not to discount other people's experiences. It's just that their experiences may be a little bit different, and it's something to take into consideration, especially when you see a lot of Tumblr blogs, especially Tumblr blogs that might have a lot of hate and that type of thing. Often the loudest comments don't actually speak for everybody. So of course, we are talking about Korean men that grew up in Korea. So they're not Korean American, they're not Korean Australian, and we're talking about men like our husbands because that's what we know, that's what we can talk about. If you are dating a Korean man who grew up in Korea and you grew up in a Western country, there are going to be some cultural differences. If you go into the relationship thinking this relationship is going to be exactly like dating someone from my hometown or someone from my own country, the relationship is probably doomed, because you can't have that type of mindset going into an international relationship like this. So like I said, some people have this weird idea that it's politically incorrect to talk about cultural differences, but actually cultural differences can be a really positive thing. So in the other video, we talked about actually properly learning Korean, not just copying phrases from K-pop and dramas. And we talked about actually learning about Korean culture beyond K-pop and K-dramas. So since I'm now living in Korea and Sophie is living in Australia, and Sophie is in Korea for a little bit, so I'm making this video, and then we might look more in depth at some of these topics together in a video. But right now I'm just sort of giving you a rundown of a bunch of things just to be aware of if you were dating a Korean man or about to marry a Korean man. So the My Korean Husband blog started because I wanted to create something positive about being married to a Korean man. At the time online there was a lot of negativity. There wasn't really anything positive, and I thought that all the negative things were very one-sided, and I thought the information was quite outdated. So I wanted to do something lighthearted but positive, and that's how the comments came about. And what was really interesting was that so many of these things I thought was just, personality quirk of my husband. A lot of other women that were married to Korean guys were like, my husband does the same thing. Actually, it's a cultural thing. It's because of this. So that has actually really opened my mind as well, having this blog and making a community of people like this. So one of the first things to be aware of is that Koreans can get quite serious quite quickly in a relationship. It's a little bit different to Western culture, where we sometimes have this idea of casually dating or getting to know somebody, so you've kind of got something but it's not official yet, and there's a lot of in between. Koreans don't really have that. You're either boyfriend and girlfriend or you're not. So you might start dating a Korean guy and be surprised when he introduces you as his girlfriend, when maybe you haven't sort of had that conversation yet. So the dating can happen quite quickly and marriage can happen quite quickly. And this is something we're going to talk about in another video as well, just how quickly Koreans can get married. In our relationship early on, we did have a little bit of problem because I wasn't ready to say, officially we're boyfriend and girlfriend yet, whereas my husband was ready to say that. And it was difficult for him because although we're in Sydney, we were still part of a Korean community and we're with Korean people a lot. And Korean people would be like, oh, but you must be boyfriend and girlfriend, you're hanging out every day, you have this relationship. But I hadn't said, look, officially we're boyfriend and girlfriend yet. And that was very stressful for my husband. It was very stressful because people were saying to him, oh, well, she doesn't care about you. You said she's not your girlfriend. Whereas my Australian friends were like, yeah, I understand you're seeing this guy, you're seeing what's going to happen. And it wasn't until we sort of like officially boyfriend, girlfriend that he could sort of relax about that. So why was he so upset about what other people thought about our relationship? It really hurt him the way that some other Korean people would judge his relationship. And it wasn't something that he could easily just shrug off. And that's something to be aware of because Korean society is much more community orientated compared to Western society where it's much more about the individual. So the community is really important, and things that you might think is your own business can become everybody else's business as well. And that's why it can be harder to sort of shrug off those judgments for a lot of Koreans. So that's something you should really research as well, just help you understand when there are issues like that. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about language. So if you were dating a Korean guy who has spent most of his life in Korea, he probably doesn't have fluent English, but that is okay. He doesn't need to be fluent in English to express himself well. So language is not as big a problem as people think. So that's one of the things I get, there's some of the negativity sometimes, like, well, how can you be married? You don't speak the same language, blah, 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 like that. But not having the same native language can actually be beneficial to your relationship because you will be more aware of how things could be misinterpreted or misunderstood, and you're going to make that extra effort, and that can really, really help your relationship. You're going to be more careful and you're less likely to jump to conclusions. So use it to your advantage. I'm sure we all know a couple who grew up in the same place, grew up in the same town, speak the same native language, had the same experiences growing up, but in their relationship, they cannot communicate properly. Also be aware that people can have slightly different personalities depending what language they're speaking in. So my husband has a slightly different personality when he's speaking Korean compared to English. And if that personality is just a little bit different, it doesn't really matter. But just be aware, just check that there's not some major personality difference between when they're speaking English and when they're speaking Korean. So of course, learning Korean is very, very important. So I am learning Korean and I'm trying. Is very, very difficult, but start now. Start as soon as possible. Okay, so next up, try to understand about Confucianism. This doesn't mean you have to agree with his teachings, but you need to understand how it affects society, and simply knowing about it can go a long way. So there are some things that you won't agree with, but there is a difference between disagreeing with something and just sort of letting it go and spending your time actively hating something. So I really recommend researching as much as you can and understanding, but it doesn't mean that you agree with it necessarily. Expect to have cultural differences, especially in the beginning. So I was lucky in the sense that I had dated a few Korean guys before I had met my husband. So some of those things that happen right away, those cultural differences right away, I had got over them and knew about them and understood about them before I met my husband. So we had less tension in the beginning. But early on, I think was when we had our biggest fights, which I think can be the same for any type of relationship because you have less to lose then. You're not as invested in the relationship yet. But that's when some of the really big cultural differences may blow up. And that's when you can start working through them, understanding, and it will be much smoother later. So we have a saying in our relationship when there is a cultural difference that we don't like, don't understand, we say it's not wrong, it's just different. So another very important point is about Korean dramas, and Korean dramas aren't necessarily the example of a healthy relationship. So don't be basing your relationship on what you've seen in Korean dramas. And don't let somebody have bad behavior because you've seen a guy in a Korean drama do it. Korean drama is fantasy. So also in Korean dramas, there's this stereotype that Korean mother-in-laws are these horrible, horrible people that will make your life hell. And maybe some people have that experience, but it really is something that is for drama. They need conflict in the drama, and that's a really easy way to make conflict. This doesn't reflect mine or Sophie's experiences with our mother-in-laws. We have good relationships with our mother-in-laws, and it's really beneficial having that sort of friendship with your mother-in-law. It can really, really help your relationship. So something to help with the in-laws is to understand how food is important in Korean culture. The Koreans have a real emotional connection to their food, and it is really important that you like Korean food. Now, I used to be a picky eater. I think at one time in my life I just ate like plain noodles, like that's all I would eat. But now I eat lots of food, I try lots of food, and I really like Korean food. So if you are a picky eater, you just need to get over it. I'm sorry, that's all I can say. I did try to ease myself into it, like I had Korean friends wash kimchi for me and get sort of the spice off, but so I still had that taste, so I could gradually get used to it like that. It also depends on your relationship. Some Korean guys really adapt to Western food. Some people are sort of in the middle, like my husband, and there's other Korean guys that just cannot stomach Western food at all. So your in-laws are probably going to watch you very carefully about how you eat and how much you eat and if you enjoy it. So you do want to eat as much as you can, at least in the beginning, and you want to take enjoyment from it, and you want them to be able to say, oh, you eat well, good job, you're eating well, because that's a compliment. Your mother-in-law might actually be really self-conscious about her cooking as well, because you are a foreign girl, and they might be worried whether you will like the food and be very on edge about it. So just try to do your best to reassure her that the cooking is fine, you like the food, it's all fine, and it will make things a lot smoother. So of course, coming back to in-laws, learning Korean is really important here. So in Western society, we really have this ideal sometimes of the Romeo and Juliet story, like screw everybody else, we're in love, it doesn't matter about our families, that type of thing. It's not really going to work that well in Korean society, because marriage really is about two families coming together, and Korean men will usually want their parents' approval of their wife, and mother-in-laws want to have a good relationship with their daughter-in-law. So I think it's important to meet his family and know about his family before you decide to get married, because you really need to know what you're marrying into. And if his family's really great and like you, and both your families come together, it can be great, it can be wonderful. But I think that is a big consideration as well. Don't just be like, screw the world, we're in love, because there are a lot more things to marriage. So another thing is, Koreans might not show that much affection publicly. It is changing. I've seen in Korea a lot of the younger generation are now holding hands. I've seen couples kissing in cafes and that type of thing. Sort of depends on the generation and where they are. So don't be offended or upset if he doesn't actually show that much affection in public. So speaking of generational differences, be aware of that, and be aware of getting advice from people that may have left Korea a long time ago, or whose only association with Koreans are Koreans that left a long time ago, because there has been big changes in Korea. So when you look at the history of Korea, Korea was a poverty-stricken developing country, and now they are a modern first world country, and all this has happened in the space of a lifetime. So you are going to get these really big differences between the generations, and I can see a lot of that between my father-in-law and my husband. There are some big differences there, so that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so some of the logistics of having an international relationship. So which country you're going to live in, what about family, what about visas? All these things are extra things that you would, if you were marrying someone from your hometown, you're not going to have these problems, but you are going to have these problems when you marry somebody from another country. Expect there to be big decisions to be made very early on in the relationship. You may not have been dating for that long, and you might have to make a big decision. Do I want to be with this person for the rest of my life? Do I want to marry them? You have to make decisions like this sometimes. It plays out probably quite different to what you thought when you were growing up. One of the positive things about visas, especially when we did the Australian visas, is it actually makes you really think about your relationship. So you have to write down about your relationship. What are your goals? All these things. Do you want children? All these things you need to think about very early on in your relationship, and that can actually benefit your relationship because you're being honest and open and getting it all out there. And don't expect the governments to care that you're in love with someone from another country. They will be completely indifferent and they will make things difficult, and visas are stressful and can take a long time and there can be a lot of waiting and nobody cares. So when being with a Korean man, be aware of maybe the upbringing that he has. So Korea is still a very conservative country. You might be surprised at the level of homophobia and those type of things. But even though he's grown up that way, it does not mean that those are his opinions. It can just be what society has just put on him and he's just absorbed. So you can challenge those opinions, challenge what their ideas are about households and all these other social issues, because what I found in my experience is coming to Australia for my husband. He went to Australia several years ago and that really opened up his mind a lot. So just because a Korean guy has grown up in this type of society doesn't mean that his views are going to be like that all the time. Of course, if he's marrying a Western woman, he's marrying a woman from another country, he's already got an open mind and that can be expanded on a lot more. So another thing to think about is work environment. So for example, the work environment in Australia is very different to Korea. And so if your husband is coming back to Korea and going back into a Korean work environment, that can be very stressful. What country you're in can affect your relationship dramatically. One thing to think about and to research about is how Western media shapes people's perception of Asian men. So when was the last time you saw an Asian male be like the lead romantic guy in a Hollywood movie? Probably never. So Asian men in movies, in Hollywood movies, tend to be like maybe like, oh, the kung fu guy or the scary villain or the funny sidekick. This affects how people view Asian men and how they view them romantically. Even if people don't realize it, the media has shaped their perception. So when I was first dating my husband, I had some friends say things like, oh, I don't like Asian guys, but your husband's quite cute. It's like, well, why do you have to say, I don't like Asian guys like that? Why do you have to make it like it's this abnormal thing to be with an Asian guy? There's all these things that you will start to realize that can be really frustrating. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of people find K-pop quite confronting, is because K-pop shows Asian men in a sexual way, in a way that is desirable. And that can be confronting for some people because it doesn't match with their worldview. The worldview that society has sort of shaped for them, it doesn't actually match with that. So for some people it's like, oh, what is this? What is this K-pop? But I think that's actually one of the really good things about K-pop, that it is challenging that idea, and I hope Western society can change for the better. So like any relationship, how you resolve conflict is really, really important, and of course it is really important when you are in a relationship that has cultural differences. Every relationship is different, so some people tend to go one way more culturally, one person might adapt more. Personally for us, we aim to meet halfway in the middle. So for us, that is better than having one person adapt completely to the other person's culture. So we aim to be bicultural like that. I think that is a good goal to have. And I am very, very grateful to have married someone from a different country, because my mind has been expanded. I've had all these new experiences. My life has become so different and so amazing and so cool. So hopefully if you're in an intercultural relationship and you needed advice, you can take some of these things on board and make it even better. And some of these issues Sophie and I will explore more in other videos. So if you have any questions or there's a certain topic that you want us to talk about, let us know in the comment section and we will try to do that. Make sure you go over to the blog and check out the comics. So we have comics about our daily life together, just like funny little incidents like that. And then we have videos together. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on the social media, and I'll see you guys later. Bye. Bye bye. Bye bye bye.